Welcome once again to Launch, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Space Policy Series, which examines the programs and people driving the next era of deep space exploration. Picking up where we left off in November, much progress has been made. The SLS core stage completed its penultimate hot fire test. SLS boosters continue to be stacked, and the Orion Artemis 1 spacecraft assembly has been completed and transferred to NASA's Exploration Ground Systems team. Today, we examine the role of Marshall Space Flight Center and Greater Huntsville's industrial capabilities for evolving hardware and systems for sustained lunar operations. We'll hear from U.S. Representatives Terry Sewell and Steve Palazzo, as well as Jody Singer, Director of Marshall Space Flight Center, and Lisa Watson-Morgan, Manager of the Human Landing System Program. The overarching theme of our event today is look ahead to Artemis 3 and the key milestones which will get us there. First to come in the program sequence is Artemis 1, when an SLS rocket will deliver an uncrewed Orion spacecraft on a path toward lunar orbit, where it will travel 40,000 miles beyond the moon before returning home. Artemis 2 will be the first crewed flight of SLS and Orion, with 4 astronauts transiting in a cislunar orbit akin to Apollo 8 to validate equipment and conduct system tests in preparation for future surface operations. And of course, Artemis 3 will be the culmination of these missions, landing Americans on the moon for the first time since Apollo 17 in 1972. But the moon is not the program end state, but merely a waypoint to Mars and beyond. As NASA and its commercial partners press ahead on their Artemis program objectives, our policy series will continue to capture and catalog these advances as they occur. And now, before Mike Ward of the Huntsville-Madison County Chamber of Commerce virtually sits down with Representatives Sewell and Palazzo, we have a short introduction video for you. Thank you again for joining us today. Ad Lunam.
It matters in Huntsville. Long before we started decoding DNA, Huntsville already had it. What is it? It is the intangible DNA-like force that has propelled Huntsville and the Tennessee Valley through 200 years of growth with a common vision, passion, and work ethic to get it right and get it done. When World War threatened us as a nation, it seemed natural to us that Redstone Arsenal emerged to supply the armies that freed the world from tyranny. It is what we do. We rise to the challenge. Maybe Wernher von Braun sensed that intangible it when he settled in Huntsville as his home and place to start the space race. Dr. von Braun worked with local leaders, born and raised in Alabama, to create the University of Alabama in Huntsville, a world-class research institution, and developed Cummings Research Park, now the second largest research park in America. When John F. Kennedy challenged the nation to reach for the stars, he turned to Huntsville to lead.
We choose to go to the moon.
We heard the roar of the Saturn V engines long before anyone else did, because we had the right stuff to step up and do it. A part of Huntsville landed on the moon in 1969. It was never in doubt. Marshall Space Flight Center, the Army's Aviation and Missile Command, and the U.S. Space and Rocket Center ground us in what we do best. Redstone Arsenal now houses 78 unique functions and commands. We help a nation soar. The U.S. Space and Rocket Center has hosted more than 900,000 space campers from all 50 states and 150 nations. And we now have Mars in our sights. But why stop there? The Rocket City knows no limits. We don't rely on the rest of the world to come to us. We create and develop companies that serve the globe. We don't need a name because we all know what it means to live and work in a city that values its past but isn't beholden to it. We look to the future with the wisdom of our past. The engines we build help power and move a nation and a galaxy. We're defying gravity, powering new next-generation launch vehicles to push us to new limits and beyond. It just seems to keep finding us. We were always looking over the horizon toward new frontiers. It started with the first settlers, moved to textiles, shifted to munitions, transformed into rockets and missiles. The impulse to create, move, invent, and recreate, it has always mattered in Huntsville. Do you have what it takes to join us? We think so.
Thanks to Christian and David with the U.S. Chamber for giving us this opportunity to co-host today's event with them as we take a closer look at the future of human space exploration and how, more specifically, the Marshall Space Flight Center and Huntsville businesses will help us to realize that future. It's now my pleasure to welcome Congressman Steve Palazzo. Congressman Palazzo represents Mississippi's 4th Congressional District, which includes the Stennis Space Center. He's a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and a current member of the Mississippi National Guard. He serves on the House Appropriations Committee, where he sits on 2 subcommittees, the Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee, which funds NASA, and he also serves on the Homeland Security Subcommittee. Congressman, thank you for joining us today, and let me go right to our first question. What should the federal government's role be in space exploration going forward?
Yeah, Mike, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate Christian as well, help partnering and putting this on. I've had the great opportunity to be out to Huntsville, and I'm really jealous of the wonderful center that y'all have out there, and the great people and personnel. As we know, our number one asset. Some people like to think it's actually the hardware, but it's really our people and our workforce. They make us number one, and that's the reason why America leads in space superiority. But yeah, the federal role going forward, there's always going to be a federal role in space exploration. I think it's necessary. What I've seen over the years is through the federal agency, through NASA, creating a roadmap has been so helpful. A roadmap, back to the moon with a sustainable moon presence, and then beyond. To possibly Mars in the future. You need to have that. You need the ability to zero in on your objective. And I think NASA as a whole, I think the industry has been very appreciative of that roadmap, which we're following to help put the first woman and the next man on the moon. And so second to that, I would say Congress has a role, serving on the Appropriations Committee. We appropriate money to NASA. And of course, it helps when we do appropriations to actually know where they're going and what they want to spend their money on. So that roadmap tied in with the appropriations is extremely important. And the government as a whole, just as we have laws of the sea that kind of not necessarily regulate, but it gives you a code of conduct for other nations to follow. As we see many other nations participate in space exploration, I think we're going to need that same code of conduct. We're going to need, just as we have laws for the sea, we're going to, I don't like creating too many laws, because I am a limited government kind of guy, but I do think there will be some laws necessary regarding space travel as well as space exploration.
Thank you. Yeah, could not have answered that any better. So looking at the Artemis program, what do you think Artemis really represents from a national standpoint as this national capability?
Wow. Number one, inspiration. I mean, it is so inspiring to see us come together. I mean, this is a huge undertaking, and unlike it's been taken in over 50 plus years. And so the inspiration comes from this fact that we're going to have the first woman, and the next man, we'll forget about the next man, but we're going to have the first woman on the moon. And I think that is tremendous. It shows us how far we've come as a nation to close those divides and stereotypes. And so it's going to be exciting. It's going to fuel the next generation of astronauts and scientists. And that's to me, I mean, my daughter has been fortunate enough to see a rocket engine test at Stennis Space Center. Those are pretty cool. Not as cool as an actual launch, but those kind of things help stimulate our young people and saying, hey, I want to do that. And then of course they figure out how, well, if you want to do that, you got to be good at math, you got to be good in engineering. You see, so start focusing on the science fields and everything dealing with STEM. So that's important. Second, American exceptionalism. That's what Artemis, along with our allies, partnering with us, just American exceptionalism in space. We've been on the forefront of space leadership from day one. And I think it's important, for America and the world that we maintain not only a presence, but our leadership in space. And Artemis also represents access to space. Our allies and our adversaries are expanding their footprint in space. And so we must do it as well, because it's no longer just a curiosity of what's out there, but it's also a national security component that we cannot ignore, because we wish everybody would be friendly and nice, but we can't really count on that. So we definitely need, there's a national security component of us having access to space.
Yeah. So leadership is a verb. You do actually have to demonstrate it from time to time. Now moving on to a little bit more specifically, kind of the role that Marshall and Stennis plays. Can you talk about the important role that the Marshall Space Flight Center and the Stennis Space Center plays in NASA's programs as we, conduct our space exploration programs?
Yeah, I don't even think we would be discussing Artemis if it wasn't for our NASA space centers, and especially Marshall and Stennis. They have huge roles that they play in America's space program, and they're truly national treasures as well. I mean, I don't think you could replicate what we have at either center in this day and age. And so, it's been over 60 years worth of investment, and just they're irreplaceable. We could not again reproduce what we have. Stennis is special. Stennis is the world's largest rocket testing site, and we want to test our rocket engines while they're on the ground, while it's in a safe environment. We don't want to be figuring out what an engine does when it's on the launch pad, or God forbid after it's already launched. And so we have a huge tradition and a record of testing before we fly. And it's a huge safety component, and we need to continue to always test before we fly. And so Stennis has a role there, but Marshall's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I mean, they're directly responsible for developing the space launch system. They're engaged in the life support aspect, the human landing program. So I'd like to say, I mean, there would be no safe and sustainable path to the moon if it wasn't for Marshall working on the Artemis program as well as Stennis.
Thank you. So now, I think the Artemis program is trying to help facilitate a commercial space economy below Earth orbit. How important do you think Artemis is to the success of our being able to move beyond low Earth orbit for potential commercial activity?
It's absolutely a critical first step. Again, NASA can't do it all. And one thing I learned when I was subcommittee chairman of the space subcommittee for 5.5 years is that, we task NASA with a lot of things, and then we have a forgetfulness or a bad habit of not funding them to be able to do all the things that we task NASA to do. And so I think out of born from that, NASA realized, well, we can't continue to, handle the transportation of the International Space Station, low Earth orbit. Let's hand that off to somebody. We want to focus on the hard, the challenging things, looking not behind us, but beyond. And so NASA realized that, there's going to be private public partnerships. And we've seen that with the crew and cargo to the International Space Station. It works, and it's freed up NASA to focus on that bigger roadmap to return to the moon, and not only just return and stick a flag and say, hey, been here, done that, we did it again, let's move on. But we're actually going to have a sustainable lunar presence. And through that, I mean, I think it's going to spur entrepreneurism. It's going to, Artemis will drive commercial growth through. There's going to be more research. There's going to be more tools. There's going to be more engineering. There's going to be tons of opportunities for a commercial space sector, space industry to participate. And that's why it's all vital. It's all tied to the success of the Artemis program.
Thank you, Congressman Palazzo, for your time today and for your leadership in Congress. It's now my pleasure to welcome Congresswoman Terry Sewell. Congresswoman Sewell represents Alabama's 7th Congressional District. She's in her 6th term. She's from Selma. She was born in Huntsville, Alabama. She's an honors graduate of Princeton University and Oxford University, and she has her law degree from the Harvard School of Law. She serves as the vice chair of the House Ways and Means Committee and is a member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, where she chairs the Defense Intelligence and Warfighter Support Subcommittee. She also serves on the Intelligence Modernization and Readiness Subcommittee. Congresswoman Sewell, thank you so much for joining us. And let me get straight to the first question. How does your experience as a member of the Intelligence Committee impact your view of the importance for the U.S. to be a leader in human space exploration?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Mike, for the opportunity to join you today and to be a part of this conference. As you stated, I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, and while I have the great distinction and pleasure of representing Alabama's 7th Congressional District, which includes Birmingham, Montgomery, my hometown of Selma, Alabama, we call ourselves the America's Civil Rights District. It is a great honor for me to be a part of this program representing Alabama and also my birthplace, Huntsville, Alabama. My mom and dad met when they had their first jobs after graduating from Alabama State at Council Training School, which was on the hill, as you all call it, of Alabama A&M University. It was that high school. It was a segregated high school back then in the 60s. But I am happy to be here representing the state of Alabama and the future home of Space Command. Let me start by just saying that I know that how important it is that our national security, as well as our innovation in America, is so critically important and tied to space exploration and human exploration in space in particular. Being a leader in the United States to remain globally competitive and sustain our national defense and our national economy, I believe human space exploration is critically important. As you stated, I'm a senior member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. I've served as the chair of the Defense Intelligence and Warfighter Support. The importance of our satellite overhead architecture, our geospatial connection and coordination has been a critical component to our national security. And likewise, our human space exploration has been a source of tremendous innovation, technical expertise, and is vital to our global security protection, as well as our competitive advantage. I also am very proud to be a part of Alabama's delegation in Congress. I'm proud of the significant role that our state, and in particular the city of Huntsville, has played for over 60 years in our nation's space exploration. Alabama has a rich and long history when it comes to space, and I'm very proud of the decision that Huntsville was selected as our nation's Space Command headquarters. Huntsville, as so many of you know, is known as a rocket city. It's a hub for innovation and defense intelligence, and is the home to Marshall Space Flight Center, home to Army's Redstone Arsenal, and it features so many offices of our major defense contractors. So look, I think that we have a very rich history in Alabama when it comes to space, the rocket city being Huntsville, Alabama. And I can't tell you how important it is when we think about our leadership, our global leadership and international leadership when it comes to space exploration is really critically important. I obviously think it's really great that that I get a chance to see it from a different vantage point as chair of the Defense Intelligence and Warfighter Support. The importance of our overhead architecture to our intelligence and our national security is something that I've gotten a chance to see firsthand. So I think all of this is really critically important in investing in space exploration, the importance of our economic growth and national security. All of this kind of ties together, and it's an honor for me to not only represent Alabama, but also to be a part of our oversight when it comes to our national security and intelligence.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important for us to make sure that our allies are able to partner with us as we kind of venture further into space. So as a woman who has broken more than her share of glass ceilings, how important is it to you that the next boots that step onto the lunar surface include those who are filled by a woman?
Well, I think that's critically important. As Alabama's first Black Congresswoman, I know the importance of being the first, but also making sure that you're not the last. It is incumbent upon those of us who have come first to ensure that we not only break those glass ceilings, but we tear down those doors and we have a seat at the table, we as women. And so I'm really excited about the prospects that a woman will be the next one on the moon. And I think that in the words of Neil Armstrong, to know that we will soon witness the first women's step on the moon will be a small step from womanhood, but a giant leap for mankind.
Yes, it will be. It will be. So now, kind of back to some of the intelligence issues that you had to grapple with. What's at stake for the U.S. over the next decade as competition for access to space and its resources increase?
Well, sure. But before I answer that question, I really complete the question of being first. I think that when I think about my place in Alabama's history, I think about Dr. Mae Jemison, who was the first African-American woman to be in space. She is an Alabamian, hails from Decatur, Alabama. And look, I think that it's critically important that when we think about breaking barriers, that we not only are breaking barriers when it comes to women, but when it comes to African Americans as well. This being Black History Month, February being Black History Month, I think it's critically important to acknowledge the wonderful Black astronauts who are making history on the Artemis team, including Victor Glover and Stephanie Wilson and Jessica Watkins. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that in order to know that you can be it, you have to see it. So seeing it is believing it, is achieving it. And because of the amazing advancement of women, of African Americans in this nation, we will see and believe what is possible. And I think that that is also critically important when we think about your question about the next decade of competition. You don't want to leave anyone on the sidelines. I think that space exploration, humans walking on the moon and into space. I think that it's critically important that we have the very best Americans engaged in the research, development of exploration, the innovation of exploration, and that we see people who are who reflect the beautiful tapestry that is America. I think that what I've learned is that the very best decisions come when we have a full diversity at the table, and people who are, that the full diversity that is America is reflected in all of our aspects of life, especially when we think about science and STEM. And so, your question about competition for access to space and the next decade or so, I think that technology and and innovation sectors are global communities of collaboration and competition, and that in order for us to truly advance in science, we need to make sure that we are reaching our common goal and we're being inclusive in that as well.
Yeah, we recently dedicated a school in Mae Jemison's honor. The newest high school that Huntsville has is named Jemison High School.
Awesome.
Yeah, so and we were delighted to have her kind of there as a part of that ceremony too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So to pick up on what you were talking about with regard to STEM, what can we do to enhance STEM education and then STEM education opportunities to ensure that all students have equal access to join the space workforce of tomorrow?
Well, as a daughter of two educators, I know that knowledge is power, and I know that education is a great equalizer. When I think about STEM education, I think it's critically important that we as a nation invest in STEM education across the board. And so in 2016, I was proud to lead the charge to secure up to $500,000 for Lawson State Community College here in Birmingham as a part of NASA's Minority University Research and Education project. These funds continue to invest in equitable STEM education and allow those that are in historically disadvantaged communities to actually receive high quality training in advanced science skills. By developing programs with strong science, technology, engineering, and mathematics that focus on equitable access, we equipped our students with children with the tools that they need to succeed in the modern day workforce. When I first joined Congress, I had the opportunity to sit on the Science Technology Committee, and I had a chance to interview or question as a witness the NASA administrator at the time. And I asked him, I said, I know that we have the capability at Marshall Space Flight Center to talk to our astronauts on the International Space Station. Can we have an opportunity to also maybe have a class talk to astronauts? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. So I sponsored something called Blast Off with Congresswoman Sewell, where we brought together 500 third graders from public schools in Birmingham, Alabama, which is majority African American. And we had 500 third graders in Alabama, in Birmingham, in the auditorium at Carver High School. We had secured resources and funds in order to upgrade that high school technology. And for 30 minutes, we had a connection with the International Space Station. To see the expression on our children, to actually count down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then all of a sudden see on the big screen on that stage an astronaut at the International Space Center. I think I was probably more mesmerized than the students, or just as intrigued. But they, for 30 minutes, got a chance to ask questions themselves. We had 7 of those third graders who won a competition to be able to ask the question directly to the astronaut. When you look out the window, what do you see? And to see the astronaut looking out the window and telling them, what do you eat when you're up at the International Space Space Center? What do you do? And so those were just some of the questions that these third graders got to ask. But, I believe that was, 9 years ago. I know I still get letters from some of those third graders who are now obviously in high school. Some, are actually interested in doing, becoming an engineer or being involved in the space industry. And that's what it's all about. Each one teach one, but also really expanding the imaginations of our young people to understand that this is not something that's far-fetched, that it's within their realm of possibility. And that's what, STEM education does, in making sure we in the federal government provide adequate incentives and resources to be able to expand their imagination and to increase the number of women and people of color and those from socially, economically disadvantaged communities to have the opportunity to really fully explore their full possibilities in the science and technology fields is something that's critically important. So I know that this is one reason why I'm so excited that Huntsville is ground zero for Space Camp. Can't tell you how many wonderful people come up to me and talk to me about their experience at Space Camp, and have now become engineers, have become scientists, have become researchers. When I think about all of the amazing innovations that have come from our space exploration, everything from the microwave to GPS, coordination and all that, is critically important. So look, I think that we're very privileged here in Alabama to have such an amazing, center, that being the Rocket Center, the Rocket City of Huntsville, being such a big part, an integral part of our national human space exploration, but also such an important part of our innovation globally and our competitiveness. To be in our backyard is something that is truly important, that we continue to develop and that we continue to invest in.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think you're an inspiration to all those that you touch, and we greatly appreciate your time today and your leadership in Congress. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, it's my pleasure to kind of turn this over to Jody Singer, the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, for an update on some of the really exciting things that are happening with the Artemis program here in Huntsville at the Marshall Space Flight Center. Thanks.
For more than 50 years, NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center has anchored America's human spaceflight program. And NASA's new Moon to Mars program, the Artemis program, is no different. Before it ever lifts off for deep space, Artemis starts on the ground right here in North Alabama. Key components of the Artemis program are being managed, built, and tested right now. We're building on the rich history and expertise of Marshall Space Flight Center and its many contractors and suppliers. The Space Launch System, NASA's great rocket, is managed right here at Marshall Space Flight Center. Following in the steps of the Saturn V rocket that took America to the moon more than 50 years ago, SLS can simultaneously launch astronauts and the large cargo, including life support systems needed to live and work on and around the moon. Once astronauts are in the orbit around the moon, NASA's Human Landing System will take astronauts to the surface, and it's Marshall Space Flight Center that NASA has entrusted to manage the Human Landing System program. Once again, there will be American boots on the lunar surface, and that's because of the hard work around the agency and at Marshall and with our nationwide partners. Other work Marshall is working on right now includes our science payloads on our Artemis 1 mission, the life support systems, and habitats for living in deep space. Together with industry, academia, and our international partners, we are redefining what is possible and building not just toward America's next giant leap, but a sustainable presence on the moon. And we will live, learn, and discover, and lighting the way and the path toward Mars. And the investments America is making in our work are making a difference in our workforce and in our communities. Across America, the SLS program engages more than 1,100 companies in 44 states to build America's next rocket. In North Alabama alone, the SLS program supports more than 12,000 jobs. It generates more than $43 million in tax revenues and more than $1.9 billion in economic output. In the state of Alabama, NASA's Moon to Mars activity supports more than 18,000 jobs in 2019, with over 25,000 nationwide, and it's generated more than $3.3 billion in economic output. For every $1 million of labor income earned, an additional $15 million in labor income is generated. I want you to know what we are doing makes a big difference for the economy and for everyone as we build the future of space exploration. But here is my favorite part. In addition to the jobs and the economic output that NASA's Moon to Mars program supports across the country, we're also helping to inspire, educate, and train the next generation of STEM students, America's best and brightest, the Artemis generation. As we near the first launch of the most powerful rocket ever built and embark on this new era of space exploration, join me in getting excited for what is to come. From liftoff to landing, Marshall Space Flight Center is critical to the Artemis program. And here is how we're making it happen.
Before the Artemis missions to the moon ever lift off, engineers test the rocket hardware, software, and procedures right here in North Alabama. In the largest testing campaign since the space shuttle, the SLS program built full-scale replica hardware for many parts of the SLS rocket. Then, they pushed that hardware to its limits and beyond. The SLS program forever changed the Tennessee Valley skyline with towering new test stands. The new test stands applied thousands of pounds of force to propellant tanks, giving engineers real-world data to go with their computer models. Then, they went even farther. Engineers decided to see just how much force those tanks could withstand. The results were spectacular and useful. Engineers' estimates were within 5% of the actual force it took to rupture the tanks. For the upper part of the rocket, above the core stage, United Launch Alliance and Decatur built a test version of the upper stage, while crews from Lockheed Martin and Marshall Space Flight Center built copies of the rocket's adapters. This upper stage stack, built right here in North Alabama, also passed its test with flying colors. Several local companies built a core stage Pathfinder. Crews used the Pathfinder to practice lifting, handling, and other logistics before working with one-of-a-kind flight hardware. SLS will lift off with more thrust than the Saturn V, and it's about the same size. Both were designed to send astronauts to the moon, but SLS uses modern-day computing power to get there. These are computers and software called avionics throughout the rocket, from the solid rocket boosters to the core stage to the upper stage and the Orion spacecraft. Engineers need to make sure it all works together on launch day. The SLS avionics are tested in state-of-the-art facilities at Marshall Space Flight Center. Testing software developed at Marshall allows engineers to virtually fly the rocket thousands of times before it ever lifts off. In that same building, engineers use the Thrust Vector Control Lab to test steering of the rocket. They recently tested a new electric thrust vector control system for future, more powerful version of SLS. Speaking of lifting off, when Artemis 1 takes to the heavens, North Alabama will be ready. The Launch Control Center at Marshall has been outfitted with new consoles and loop hardware and software. Engineers are using the new SLS Engineering Support Center to practice communicating with their counterparts at Kennedy and Johnson Space Centers and at contractor sites nationwide. In addition to testing the rocket in North Alabama, several key pieces of flight hardware are built here. The upper stage for the Block 1 SLS is called the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage. Boeing in Huntsville manages the stage, and United Launch Alliance in Decatur builds it. The stage is complete for Artemis 1. The first mission of SLS and the Orion crew capsule to the moon. Now, Boeing and ULA are building the upper stage for the Artemis 2 flight and will soon begin work for the Artemis 3 upper stage. At Marshall Space Flight Center's Advanced Weld Facility, technicians use self-reacting friction stir welding tools to weld together two adapters that connect parts of the rocket. The adapters for the Artemis 1 rocket are complete and ready for integration with the rest of the rocket. NASA civil servants and Teledyne Brown and Lockheed Martin technicians are building adapters for Artemis 2 right now. With the Artemis 1 rocket being assembled at Kennedy Space Center, the program is managing hardware production in North Alabama and across the nation for the Artemis 2 and Artemis 3 missions and beyond. NASA will make history with the Artemis 3 mission, putting a new generation of astronauts on the moon. Marshall manages the Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans, where the core stage and the Orion crew capsule are constructed. All the major components for the Artemis 2 core stage are manufactured. Soon, the major sections will be joined to create the backbone for the second SLS rocket. This second rocket will fly astronauts back to the moon for the first time since 1972. SLS will evolve to become even more powerful and capable in the future. Boeing in Huntsville has designed a new upper stage for the Block 1B rocket. Dynetics is working on an adapter with space to carry large payloads. Another program being managed out of Marshall is procurement of a new human landing system to land astronauts on the moon as part of the Artemis 3 mission. The HLS program is led by Lisa Watson Morgan. Here she is to tell us more about this exciting program.
Hi, I'm Lisa Watson Morgan, the Human Landing System Program Manager at Marshall Space Flight Center. It's an exciting time in North Alabama and for space enthusiasts all around the world as we prepare to go back to the moon with U.S. industry. In April of last year, NASA selected 3 companies to begin the development of a human landing system that will put the first woman and the next man back on the moon, specifically the lunar South Pole region. The Blue Origin-led team with Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Draper is one partner. Our second partner is Dynetics, a Leidos company with multiple partners around the US and abroad. And then our third partner is the SpaceX team. Since then, NASA has been working hand in hand, virtually of course, with each of these companies in order to further their designs. You can see that each partner chose a slightly different approach, which is so exciting for NASA because we established a high-level set of requirements providing this innovation and dissimilar redundancy that you see here on the screen. The HLS approach is to use the speed and the innovation of industry along with the best of the government, the subject matter experts from human spaceflight. When HLS goes to the moon, we'll go in a way that reflects the world today with government, industry, and international partnerships to build a global response and effort in this challenging mission. Our 3 partners have subcontractors, both large and small, throughout the country, including several here in North Alabama, making it truly a national effort. Later this year, we'll be announcing which one or 2 of our 3 partners will continue to the next stage of development, ultimately culminating in a crewed demonstration mission to the moon. How exciting. The HLS team is proud to be part of the heritage of the Alabama space exploration culture. And we thank you for this opportunity to give you the latest on our amazing program. Now back to you, Jody.
As you can see, NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center anchors the nation's Moon to Mars exploration program. We also nurture a rich ecosystem of suppliers and contractors in North Alabama and across the nation. With strong bipartisan support in Congress, the SLS and HLS programs, along with Marshall's other contributions to science, technology, and exploration, are enabling America's continued leadership in space exploration. And we look to the moon with an eye toward Mars, and we will continue to work with our commercial partners to create a sustainable architecture for all of future science and human exploration. We are going together, and I hope you will join us.
Thanks, Jody and Lisa, for telling us all about the amazing work going on at Marshall Space Flight Center and in North Alabama. With Apollo, NASA got to the moon by going through Huntsville. And now 50 years later, with the Artemis program, the path to the moon still goes through Huntsville. Now, we want to shift gears. We're proud of our heritage and our history, and we're building on that, but we want to talk about the future, and we want to talk to some of the folks that make up the Artemis generation. NASA's ultimate goal with human exploration is to put humans on Mars. And somewhere out there, there are students in school right now who will be the first astronauts to walk on Mars. It might be one of the students with us today. They come from New Century Technology High School, and they're involved in a program called Inspires. That's a STEM outreach effort of the University of Alabama, Huntsville. It partners high school students with undergraduate students in a design build challenge. So we are among the right folks, and we believe we've found the right person to answer their questions, NASA astronaut Mike Fink. Colonel Fink is a veteran of 3 space flights and is currently training for the crew flight test of Boeing CST-100 Starliner. Having spent 6 months aboard the International Space Station, Colonel Fink knows a thing or two about living and working in space. And to make sure we have just the right mix for this, we've asked Destin Sandlin to serve as our moderator for today's Q&A. You might know Destin from his Smarter Everyday series on YouTube. He uses his natural curiosity to make sure the rest of us, well, get smarter every day. Destin, take it away.
Thanks, Marcia. I appreciate it very much. It's my privilege to share the screen now with astronaut Mike Fink. And Mike is very interesting in many ways. He's not just an astronaut, he is an extremely experienced astronaut. For example, Mike, as I understand, you've flown on Soyuz, you've flown on the shuttle Endeavour, and right now you're getting ready for the new Boeing vehicle, the CST-100. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. When I was younger in high school, I just wanted to go fly in space, and now I've had a chance to fly in space on 2 different spacecraft, and I get to be on a first test flight of a brand new spacecraft. These are exciting times, and NASA, we're getting ready to go to the moon. So I've helped with the space station, and I'm going to help with the moon. It's a lot of fun.
That's amazing. What does it feel like to know you're about to launch from American soil again? I know you have to be feeling something there. How does that feel?
Yeah, so I launched twice from Kazakhstan and once from Florida. Looking forward to launching from Florida again. And it is exciting anytime you get to go on a launch. You're sitting on top of a rocket. You said, "Oh my goodness, how did I get here?" And 3, 2, 1, and then the blast off comes, and it's just it's a fantastic feeling. It's not as much as the G-forces, but the feelings of all the hard work of the whole team that's lifting you up into space, and somewhere like 9 to 10 minutes later, you're up in orbit around beautiful planet Earth. And it's a fantastic feeling. And I'm looking forward to launching later this year.
That's awesome. I'm going to be watching. I've been following the development of the spacecraft. I'm really excited about that. Mike, you're cool with it. I've got some questions here from some students right here in Huntsville, Alabama. There's some students from New Century Technology High School. Are you cool with me asking you some questions or throwing to them? Is that going to be all right?
Oh, fantastic. I love questions. I love Huntsville. And I hear a lot of really good things about the New Century Technology High School. So let's do it. This will be fun.
Okay, cool. The first question here is from Darian.
My name is Darian Thomas, and I am a junior from New Century Technology High School. My question is, what advancements are you making toward an all-inclusive spacesuit design that fits a broader range of astronauts and complements your missions to the lunar surface and beyond?
Darian, great question. I love spacesuits. You can see there's a picture of me in a spacesuit right behind you. I know 5 or 6 spacesuits already, and it's exciting because we at NASA, we've been building spacesuits since the Gemini program. We did spacewalks on the outside of space station or outside of spacecraft, now space station. We've walked on the moon, and so we really have some really good ideas, and we're building a brand new space suit that's called the Exploration Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or XEMU. And it takes all the knowledge we have, all the experience we have, to put it into one really awesome space suit where you can put it on. You get into the back, you climb in, you suit up, almost as cool as Iron Man. It's a self-contained spacecraft, so you don't need to have an umbilical around. It fits all kinds of people. Tall ones, shorter ones, men, women. It fits everybody, and it's a fantastic spacesuit. It's a big difference than our current extravehicular mobility unit in that it has a lot of mobility in the legs. When we go on a spacewalk on the outside of space station, and I've done that 9 times, we don't really use our legs. It's really hands and arms that we're moving as we go on the outside weightless. Now we're going to the moon. We're going to be walking. We're 1/6 of our weight, so there's still some gravity there. And we need to bend down and pick up our lunar samples and harvest the materials and do all the fantastic things. And we need to have that more mobility. We need to be able to walk. I mean, really spacewalk or moonwalk, if you will. And so these new spacesuit, this new spacesuit, the XCMU, is in development. We're testing it out every day, and we're looking forward to seeing our buddies, and who knows, could be me, could be you, Darian, as we walk on the surface of the moon.
That is an awesome question, Darian. So I've always thought about the joints in the spacesuit. Like if they rotate, the seal has to be maintained. Mike, I'm going to add on to this question. Is it kind of like wearing a big balloon when you're in a pressurized suit like that?
Yeah, and you'll notice every time you see it on a commercial, because there's a lot of spacesuits on commercials or even movies. I won't mention The Martian or other one or the movie Gravity. They don't have their spacesuits inflated, and they're like, I watch those movies and say, oh, they're dead. It's all fiction, but we're inside of a big pressure vessel. We need to maintain pressure on our body. Usually it's around 4 to 6 pounds per square inch, which is approximately 1/3 of atmospheric pressure, but it's all 100% oxygen. So it's really tricky to make a spacesuit that is maneuverable, that you can walk around in and do your work and still keep the pressure you need to stay alive.
Oh, that's awesome. So we have another question here from Evelyn. She has a question about preparation for space flight.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Torstensen. I'm a sophomore at New Century Technology High School in Huntsville, Alabama, and I was wondering what skills and experiences outside of training and education helped you prepare for the mission emotionally and physically, and which aspects were a bit more difficult to master. Thank you.
Evelyn, that's a very insightful question, because we don't always talk about emotional things, but it's really important, especially for long missions. So my very first mission was up to the space station for 6 months. I'd never been in space before. One of my mentors, John Young, he flew on 3 different spacecraft and walked on the moon, said, I hope you like it, your first flight, ha ha ha. So it was interesting, but how was I ready? So of course NASA gives us all the training we need, but there's more to it, and that's why your question was insightful, because it's the things outside of who we are. When I was in college, I was an exchange student to a very strange place. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Soviet Union, and that was my very first international trip ever, to go over to Soviet Union. And I lived in other countries since then. In my Air Force career, I lived and worked in Japan on a Japanese air base. And having those experiences outside of my home area, outside of my comfort zone, new languages, new cultures, new alphabets, it really prepared me to be able to handle a new environment, such as the International Space Station. And for 6 months, I was up there with just one other person, Gennady Padalka from Russia, and we got along great for 6 months. I missed my family. That's the hardest part for me when I go on my long duration space flights, is I really miss my family. But you know what? We learned to communicate by telephone only, and it worked great. And so I think there are other things besides official training and education. It's the life experiences that you have that will give you the fortitude to handle whatever life throws at you, whether it's floating aboard the space station or going to the moon or getting assigned to someplace overseas, that you'll have the fortitude, the emotional ability to be away from home.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight, because we think about space as this really big operation and all the people, like you were saying earlier, that got you there, but it ultimately comes down to inside your own head. There's a lot that has to happen mentally in order to get ready for that. So that's a really good question, Evelyn. We're going to zoom out now, Mike. So Evelyn was talking about you and your personal experience. Yeah, we're gonna go to a much wider question about the whole big concept of space, and that's going to be from Chris.
My name is Chris Pomakiam, and I'm a senior at New Century Technology High School in Huntsville, Alabama. How can we expect to see international or even private cooperation on future missions like Artemis or Gateway? Will it be similar to the current relationship, or do you think it might even expand?
Chris, we have, as a country, have done a lot of really smart things with our space program, and we're starting to just realize the fruits of our labor. What I mean is, for example, we bought a space shuttle. We paid a company, a lot of companies. They put together a space shuttle for us, and we, as a country, we owned it, and we flew it when we needed to, and it was great. But since the space shuttle went away, we've adopted a different model, for example, to get to the space station. Right now, we rent a spacecraft from SpaceX or Boeing, and we take them up to the International Space Station. stay up for about 6 months and come back home, and then the company refurbishes them, but NASA doesn't own them. So this, but it also allows SpaceX and Boeing, our commercial partners, as we call them, to use that spacecraft if they want to. So now for us, we look at it like a rental car model, right? So if you and your family ever went to a different city, say Los Angeles, you don't need to buy a car to drive around there, because everybody drives in LA. Apparently nobody walks, but we rent a car, and then when you're done, you give it back, and then they can rent it to someone else, and that way the cost of the car is shared by a lot. So it makes it easier for everybody. So we, as a customer at NASA, we're doing the same thing for Artemis and Gateway. So we're providing some things like Orion. We own Orion. That'll be a NASA spacecraft. But once we get to the Gateway, which is a mini space station around the moon, to get up and down from the moon, we're going to rent a service from 1 or 2 or 3 different companies. Right now, these companies are working on it, and they will make something out of it too, because they will be able to use that service for other things. And there's a lot of resources on the moon that we can use to make life better on planet Earth. And so this is a really great opportunity to expand our economy, more jobs, more high-tech jobs, especially for folks from New Century Technology High School and many other people like that. We're going to need your help because there's a lot of space work in the future, and it's going to really be a benefit to our country and to planet Earth. So there's going to be good jobs, action and adventure, and it'll help planet Earth. So I'm excited about the future.
You did a really good job explaining like the massive programmatics that is the current status of like our space program. That's really good, Mike. So Trinity has a really interesting question about medicine in space. Let's hear that now.
Hello, my name is Trinity Threet, and I'm a junior at New Century Technology High School in Huntsville, Alabama. Being an astronaut requires ongoing commitment to physical well-being while in space. How does medicine need to be adapted and stored when in space, and how do you see medical technology being improved for future missions to maintain the health of astronauts in flight? Thank you.
Trinity, it's a really important question, because when we go into space, sometimes we have a doctor, an astronaut doctor with us, and sometimes we don't. So how do we stay healthy in space, because it's a different environment? And how do we, if something happens, how do we handle an emergency? And so we've thought a lot about that in the past, but we've really had a chance to work it with the International Space Station, which is a great place for us to try out new things as we go farther and farther away from home, as we go farther and farther away from hospitals and things like that. So here's a little bit of a story, right? So if somebody were to get hurt aboard the International Space Station, first and foremost, we have medicines on board the International Space Station, and we've thought through these medical packs several times. We've redesigned them, and they're really optimized right now. Fortunately, we haven't had to use them too often, outside of maybe some aspirin or something like that. But these med packs, the same concept, we're going to take with us to the moon. And we see how often we have to change out our medicines, because sometimes they're not able to be refrigerated. Sometimes the radiation can degrade how efficient these medicines are. But we have that kind of all figured out. But if somebody were to get sick, we have these medicines, we have defibrillators, we have ultrasound machines. We don't have x-ray machines, but you can do a lot with ultrasound. And we can call a doctor, and we can do telemedicine. And a lot of our telemedicine concepts that we use for space actually really work well on Earth too. And telemedicine's a big thing now, between doctors in the big cities, talking out to people in the rural areas that may not be close to a hospital. And as we go farther and farther into space, like on the moon, we need to have all of this kind of really figured out, because maybe we don't have a doctor with us, and the hospitals are far away. Aboard the space station, if somebody got really hurt and we needed to bring them back right away, they could be back in a trauma center pretty much within 24 hours. When we go to the moon, it's not going to be 24 hours. So understanding our medicines better and having a good plan in case somebody does get hurt and sending very healthy people up and maintaining their health is very important. And NASA needs a lot of folks and these other private companies that are going to the moon with us. We as humans, we need a lot of help with this. So if you Trinity, or any of your colleagues are interested, that's the field of biomedicine and space medicine is a really interesting field that we need a lot of help with.
That's really interesting. I haven't thought about the fact that you could deorbit quickly from the space station, but as we go further, there's a time delay there, isn't there? I had not thought about that. Thanks for that insight.
Yeah, and if you're on Mars, it's like 6 months at the minimum, right? It could be even longer. So we need to stay. We need to be careful and stay healthy.
That's like a serious outpost. I had not thought about that. Thank you, Mike. So, Mike, we're very thankful for your time. We know that you're literally studying on your spacecraft systems and things like that. So we want to be aware of how important your time is. So we have one more question from Davion. And at the end of this question, when you're answering, if you don't mind, if you'll just give us any parting thought that you think would be good for us here. So let's hear this one from Davion.
Hello, my name is Davion from New Century Technology High School in Huntsville, Alabama. And my question to you is, what lunar materials and elements will be utilized to sustain life on the moon in future planetary endeavors, such as nitrogen and hydrogen in the atmosphere of the moon?
Well, Mr. McFall, that is a really good question, and that's something that we have ideas, but we haven't figured it all out yet. Because so the moon, right? There's really not an atmosphere, but inside the surface of the moon, we call it regolith. It's like sandy and rocky, and it's just been pounded for billions of years. So it's this kind of fine dust. And inside that are all kinds of really cool elements, including water. It's like, well, how does water not boil off? Well, it's a complex thing with the comets hitting it and things like that. But there's a lot of water on the moon. So how do we get it? How do we mine it? How do we distill the water so we can use it to drink when we're exploring? So, for example, when we go to the International Space Station, one of those half-liter bottles costs like $5,000 just to get up and down to the space station. That much water. So water, we board space station, we recycle it. We're at 90-something% efficiency of our water. On the moon, we'll use that too. But taking the resources of living off the land kind of ideas are really important. And we at NASA don't have that all completely figured out. We have some really good ideas. But one of the reasons we don't have it figured out is we don't have any moon soil. We don't have any regolith to experiment with and say, well, what if I put a laser on it? What if I put some heat on it? What if I put electricity through it? How do I work with regolith? Well, we recently set out some contracts and said, hey, companies out there, if you bring us back some regolith so that we can experiment on it, we'll give you some money, which will help us for NASA and help these companies get some experience going back and forth to the moon. And I'm personally, that's what I'm thinking about all the time. It's like, well, how do we work with material scientists? How do we figure this out? And the big question is just, how do we get some regolith to play with? We do need to live off the land to keep it cost effective. There's a lot of good resources on the moon. And not only do we need to live off the land, but the moon can really provide some resources so that we don't need to hurt planet Earth as much as we have been. For example, one of the really big important things that we need for our modern electronics are rare earth elements. The moon has a lot of them. So how do we mine those? These are really good questions. And this is where I'd like to say that as I sign off here, here's some parting thoughts, is that we have a whole really exciting future in front of us. And there's a lot of room for science and technology, engineering and math to help us explore space. And what I like about working in space is that it's constructive and not destructive. It's humans in our best form, our best versions of ourselves as humans, working together like we do on the International Space Station. And we're building a better future and making life here better on planet Earth. And we need help, because it's a constant, people are retiring and we have new people coming in, and we need your help out there. There's a workforce of the future. There's some really cool jobs out there. And if you're interested in helping make the world a better place, action and adventure and space flight, would study hard. We could use your talents. And for that, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Fantastic questions, and I look forward to seeing you on the hallways of NASA and maybe up in space. See you on the moon.
Mike, thank you so much. This was really a deep, insightful conversation. I mean, you took us to some really interesting places, and I'm grateful for your time. I know you're very busy. So with that, we'll let you get back to studying your spacecraft and getting ready for your launch. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I'm going to be watching. So thank you for your time, Mike. And with that, I will turn it back over to Christian at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Destin, for hosting a great segment with some very sharp STEM students in your hometown. And huge thanks to Mike for taking time from his busy Starliner training schedule. As we wrap up our first space policy event of 2021, some could wonder why we jumped ahead to Artemis 3 as our topic today. That answer is quite simple. The program objective is not merely proof of concept, nor even first flight. Rather, the goal is a safe return to cislunar orbit and subsequently the lunar surface. Artemis is a generational endeavor which will change the course of the American journey as we seek that essential toehold off Earth and into the cosmos. We have arrived at this seminal spacefaring moment, and future generations will regard the epic achievements to come of Artemis crew members akin to the great explorers. As we saw today, this future is upon us, and long-planned capabilities are now being readied for flight. Thomas Edison long ago remarked, "If we did all the things we were capable of, we literally would astound ourselves." As Artemis 1 soon makes its way to Launch Pad 39B, even Thomas Edison would be astounding. Our thanks again to the Huntsville-Madison Chamber of Commerce, Marshall Space Flight Center, and our partners at the Space Channel for making today possible. Keep an eye out for future events in our Space Policy series as we continue to focus upon key technologies, innovation, and workforce bringing Artemis to life. Until then, stay tuned and stay safe.